We're going to start with an update from Lynn Cavett, who's with the Michigan Department of Education on Michigan sites using the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and Teresa Hendricks is also part of that as well. Well, then
that's a typo on my part.
Okay,
everyone.
Great, that's okay.
That should just have Lynn's name in bright bold letters.
I think Teresa was from last month.
Yes, she was. My apologies.
Noel Bielaczyc is going to give us a sneak peek into results from the 2019 National Food Hub Survey. We'll have Lindsey Scalera, also from the Center for Regional Food Systems, provide some updates on the Michigan Good Food Charter and where the process for the next iteration of that is. And then we're going to end with a discussion on charting our course for the next steps of Michigan Farm to Institution Network. I know we've started this process in the past and just continuing some of that conversation about where do we go from here. We'll end with some Michigan Farm to Institution Network updates before we adjourn promptly at 11:30. Or is it noon? It's noon. All right. So with that, I think I'll pass it to Lynn.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting me today. I've been looking forward to coming and hanging out with you guys a little bit. Well, for the past 5 months, as you know, the Child Adult Care Food Program has looked a whole lot different in the state of Michigan than what we have normally looked like. And with that, I say that with some pride because we were able to be flexible and adapt to the needs of the pandemic put before us. So one of those things, I just want to tell you a little bit what's going on in the state right now as far as CACFP. Currently, about 60 to 70% of early childhood facilities across the state have shut down. And when I say shut down, they are, figuring out how they're going to reopen and have their businesses come back. The Office of the Child and the Child Care, the Office of the Child Care in the state of Michigan as well has put forth some grants that had a lot of availability to providers across the state, not so necessarily in connection with just CACFP, but to bring these child care providers back. These grants averaged about $1,500 per provider, which really has meant a lot. And they've been able to actually give price breaks to families for that and give them credits. So, those are folks that will actually be in our program, especially those if they're low enough income to be able to get those grants. So obviously our numbers have been way, way down. We have 3 sponsors in the state of Michigan that actually do our family daycare homes. And I apologize for my crazy dog here really quick. Anyway, we had 3 sponsors and obviously they are doing everything remotely. There is no in-person monitoring going on right now. So business has been completely not anything like business as usual. All of our staff is right now working on summer food reviews because Summer Foods has needed the help due to the pandemic of all the sites that open there. A little bit of, we've had waivers that have come in place. One of them is our non-congregate waiver, where food has been able to be provided in non-congregate settings. There have been some child cares throughout the state that has actually taken part of that, where they've assisted families with that. The big one for the non-congregate is something that we'll see probably kick in this fall, which is our at-risk after-school supper program. However, the non-congregate is in place. However, the USDA is yet to approve the enrichment piece of the waiver. So we are forging ahead with that. We're going to be working out the logistics where we hear that USDA may not be approving the waiver very quickly. But we do know that without that waiver in place, the poorest of the poor children here in our state may not be fed that supper in the evening. So we're doing everything within our power to get that pushed through. Another thing too is, I'm not sure how closely all of you work with the GSRP and Head Start sites across the state. Many of them have been actually, school districts have shut down quite a few of those classrooms across the state due to needing the room for their K through, like K through 5 or K through 8 students. So the sites for GSRP have been kind of, just kind of maneuvered around a little bit. Some of them are going to be doing remote learning. I have a very real concern that I've expressed with my team and my counterparts at MDE, that the children that are basically ages 3 through 5, and if they are not enrolled in a Head Start or a GSRP virtually, if something was to occur, especially in a CAP district, which is Community Eligibility District, those students may not be fed because they will be truly, for lack of a better term, not on the books or registered anywhere, because all of those CEP districts are obviously K through 12. So that's kind of, I wish I had some great flowery report to give you guys, but CACFP is definitely down right now as far as how many we're serving across the state. Hopefully we'll be coming back fast and furious. I know that childcare right now is a huge issue in the state. Those that are open are at their capacity. We've been working very closely with licensing to just help them with any things in regards to how food service is going to look this next year, how we're going to be able to do all of this safely. My presentation is just a little bit short today because I wanted to save some time if any of you have questions that I might be able to answer for you this morning. And Abby, however you'd like to handle those questions, if you'd like.
Yeah. Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I think if folks want to open up their mics to ask questions, that's fine. If you prefer to type them in the chat, you can do so as well. But we do have some time for folks to open on the mic. Any questions for Lynn?
I think my question for Lynn would be just to maybe describe a little bit more with some detail about foods, how food is looking at these sites right now. What does a typical lunch look like, or any kind of food look like given the situation that we're in and with the waivers in place that you mentioned?
Sure. They're going to look a little different depending on the site. Right now, you know, especially for schools this fall, the K through 8 meal pattern can be followed for CACFP in schools right now. However, we are strongly encouraging all of them to still follow the preschool meal pattern. There's not a huge amount of variance there. But enough that, as you know, in our state, we have taken a pretty strong stance on grain-based desserts, which I'm 100% in support of. I have a fear that we're going to see that there's these really awesome little things called Cinnamonies, and I just have a fear that our little preschoolers are going to get those where they are doing virtual. The other thing that has been a very hot topic is family-style meals. And family-style meals can actually, Lara just put out guidance, which Lara is the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. And Lara just put out guidance this last week that if family-style meals can be done safely with minimal contact, whereas like children are not serving themselves. However, or how GSRPs or Head Starts especially can do that, they're still strongly encouraging that. I think unfortunately, we're probably going to see lots and lots of prepackaged food that's going out. That is, you know, that's what we've seen over the summer with summer foods especially. It's going to look different. It is going to look different. we have worked, and I'm glad my counterpart, Melissa Lonsberry, is on the call today, because we have worked so very, very hard to change the direction of how our youngest kids here in Michigan are served and what kind of foods they are getting. And I don't want to say all bets are off, but I do want to say we're still feeding kids. Any of the conversations I have with folks across the state, I tell them very, very clearly that even if you are sending food home with families, you think about the child who is basically doing self-serve of this food. You know, please do not send home cans they have to pop open and risk being caught. Please do not send home frozen chicken that some child may have no idea as to what to do, and God forbid some child eat it like a popsicle. These are very real concerns that I have right now. So food is going to look, for lack of a better, to be able to answer your question, food may look very differently this year. And we are working hard with, you know, our sponsors to make sure that they just uphold the standards and make sure they're doing the very best they can for kids right now. And I see there's a question in.
Yeah, so Lindsay asked if centers that are still operating, have they been participating in getting food to families? How have they been working, and have they partnered with organizations, or could partnerships be helpful?
Yeah, actually they have been. The ones that have stayed open, I think about some of our organizations, like our food bank partners especially, they are still doing that, getting food to families when needed. There's been a few that have actually done home delivery, and like whenever their Head Start home visitors have went out, they have done things like that, and I know they have partnered right with food banks and their food vendors as well. Part of that has actually occurred whenever, and not necessarily through so much CACFP this summer. Some of those have been even outside with summer food and USC and some of the other programs that we have. So yeah, they delivery has just been a iffy situation. Again, in CACFP, we've not seen a lot of that, but we have seen a lot of non-congregate parent pickup that has occurred. And I would also strongly encourage them partnering with any other, you know, organizations. Again, I always send folks really back to their local food banks because they have lots of great resources to get food out into the communities. Several I know in the area that I live in the state, we have seen a lot of the food banks that have organizations that have purchased, you know, the food truck and have just done grocery pickup for folks too.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay,
Any other
great.
questions for Lynn? Is somebody else?
We
This
have
is Callie Gabork.
Oh, hi, Callie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So I'm a dietitian from Chartwell's K through 12, and maybe I'm reading too much into your tone of voice, but are you anticipating that USDA is going to give a waiver in regards to activity for those after or at-risk after-school supper and snacks? Do they seem like they're responding?
Well, I am keeping my fingers crossed. I can't, you know, personally.
You see it in your magic ball.
I can't imagine them not doing it because I actually have put out a plea, and I know that it's going to be vocalized to the state superintendent. Without that waiver, the poorest of the poor children here in our state may not have those meals, which is very, very concerning to me.
Correct, yeah.
You know, what the part of it is, it's the enrichment waiver, which is just, I'm not sure why it wasn't with the other waivers. All of the other waivers we put in literally were just extended. I mean, that was just a gift extended.
Yep.
For some reason, I have no idea why not. We requested it on our behalf from the state to extend it. I'm not sure why it wasn't just a blanket nationwide waiver, but I guess I'm not here to figure that one out today. I can assure you though, we are doing the very best we can in the Office of Health, Safety, and Nutrition to make sure that we figure out a way how to get those meals. It's right at the very top of my list. It's the very top of Diane Golzinski's list right now as well, because that's going to be very, very important. If and I'm glad whenever you said that with you're with Chartwells and how you guys are going to be able to figure it out. We got to figure it out, because like I said, I think about, whenever prior to 5 months ago, I always have the privilege of going out with my team and doing like large sponsor reviews. And I think about some of the places that I have been right in the inner city of Detroit and some of the neighborhoods. I think about the kids who go to the Franklin Wright Project that walk there. And I think, what are those kids going to do? What are they going to do? And it's very concerning to me. So keep thinking positive thoughts on it, because like I said, we are really, really, really working hard to make sure that that gets approved.
And we have another.
Yeah, it's concerning.
Go ahead, Callie.
But I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Yeah, it's concerning, especially too, I think about like our rural folks.
Yes.
That, they don't have a food pantry in their area, and it's not that easily accessible, where they can have alternative means to access something. So yeah, it's concerning, but I agree with you. I just think there was just a few waivers that the USDA didn't think of, us that are on the front lines. Some of like the little nitty gritty things that we have to do. They just didn't realize it because they're not in operations, which, they're on a higher level. I understand. But some of these are not going to have some of the implications that I know some of the other waivers we wish they passed would, that they might not, such as area eligibility for the school year and SFSP. But
sure,
hopefully we see some action from them.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, Kelly. I think, I count it truly a privilege that even in my position that I am able to go and visit these sites face to face. Like I said, prior to 5 months ago, that's a real goal of mine. I try to get out several times a year, so I know not only what's going on, but I want to see the faces of the kids that are being fed. And I think that gives you an incredible amount of passion about it. Because there are real kids that get these real meals, and they are very important to them for their sustainability. So yeah, I'm, like I said, we're fighting the good fight with that, because we're going to figure out a way somehow to make it work. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do it, what kind of workarounds we may end up having to do, but we're going to figure out a way how to get it done for sure. And it'll be a sad day if somebody says, no, there's absolutely no way. I just can't even imagine that happening. But so far, I cannot officially tell you, feed them anyway, we're going to pay you all the money, because right now the enrichment piece is still there.
Well, I appreciate it. I know your guys' hands are tied, so.
Well, it's a weird situation to be in for sure, but I'm fighting. Trust me, I'm fighting.
Thank you, Callie, for those questions and conversation. And we have another question that came in from Abby Palmer, who's with MSU Extension in the Upper Peninsula. And she is wondering, do you see a facet, Lynn, of the situation that local farms could help with? What comes to mind first, and what would that need to look like to be accepted? So I'm thinking that's a question about any requirements.
Sure. I mean, obviously, we always encourage the local farms to be involved with your school districts and maybe to provide that fresh produce that way. I know that Jamie Melner is on the call too from MDE, and she works closely with the farmers across the state. I'm not exactly sure you would I mean, we don't have a stream of farm right directly through CACFP to, it goes, obviously to the local school, to the local organization, and however they would use to distribute those products. But I would encourage actually getting involved at that level for sure.
Based on work we've done in the past, we have found that connecting with early care and education programs can be a really good
Sure.
small and steady market for small and beginning farms, especially. So I know farms have a lot of market opportunities in this moment, it seems, local farms that are doing farm direct, and this could be a really nice connection for the long term too.
Sure, and it's such a great, I'm a former early childhood director. I was the director at a school district for quite a few years. And we always partnered with local farms, and the education pieces we got were incredible, absolutely incredible. It was some of the best relationships that we had, and just really, it was a benefit to the kids, a benefit to the farms, and it just lots of great exposure for the kids to fresh fruits and vegetables for sure.
Colleen?
Yes.
Hi, it's Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, I'm from the CACFP, and I just sort of want to piggyback on what Lynn said. With the waivers, we have the, unlike the schools, CACFP has the preschool, we have our meal pattern, and we do not have any meal pattern flexibility. So the CACFP, if they're getting reimbursed under the CACFP and they're a non-school with a waiver in place, it's still the CACFP meal pattern. With the pandemic and the closures and everything, like Lynn said, we are seeing a lot of prepackaged foods and some fresh. I'm primarily working with the summer food service program right now, but we are seeing some fresh. But I would encourage local producers, local farmers to reach out to child care centers. Child care centers are still able to use their micro purchasing to purchase fresh and local produce. It would be a great way for them to incorporate fresh and local into their menus as they go forward. And then, so if they have any questions related to meal patterns or purchasing, we just encourage the centers and even the producers, if they have questions, they can contact the CACFP office, and we'd be happy to address their questions. But as long as they're, utilizing their micro purchase threshold, purchasing powers, then we strongly encourage, we like to see fresh and local over prepackaged, highly processed foods, just because we're trying to build and facilitate the children to have, healthier taste preferences as they get older. So we are happy to work with anyone to help promote this, especially at times like this, because it's better nutrition, and better nutrition builds a healthier immune system, and it's just a better bang for your buck. So thanks.
Thanks, Melissa.
To add to that, from the Chartwells, and I know there's been discussion about doing more like PC, encouraging like local farmers to partake in like PC veggies and stuff. I could see it being a benefit to them if they just worked with, companies that could help cut the vegetables and have them sold in that form and distributed in that form, because a lot of schools are really struggling right now with labor. K-12 tends to have a little bit of an older workforce, so there's a lot of people that can't necessarily work right now because they're at risk. And then we're stretched thin when it comes to service, just because nothing can be self-service this year. So we're stretched thin with labor from National School Lunch Program to CACFP and everything across the board. So less time in the kitchen to actually, fabricate and cut up some of those vegetables and those fruits.
I agree with that too.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that additional limitation that exists but is exacerbated this year for sure. I also, for those who don't know, Melissa mentioned the micro purchase threshold. I'm informed that it's now at 10,000, which is substantially more than it was a couple years ago when I was working more in that area. But that is a threshold that allows childcare centers to go outside of their normal procurement methods. So the requirements to get bids from multiple vendors and be able to work directly with small producers. It helps create a little bit of flexibility for working with small farmers, and for doing kind of, less, not necessarily like the standard structure of procurement, for finding bids and identifying competition in that system. Diane also mentioned that's an important point to raise. I wonder if Noel might be addressing that in the Food Hub report at all, or whether anyone is taking up the opportunity to do minimal preparation of locally grown fruits and vegetables. Definitely an opportunity. Thank you for highlighting that. And I'm wondering if that makes a logical transition to Noel. Are there any questions for Lynn in relation to CACFP before we transition on? Okay, I'm also going to put, there's a link in the chat right now that will take you to the demographic survey that I mentioned earlier. If you have a moment to fill it out at any point during right now, it's completely voluntary. You don't even, if you fill it out, you don't even have to respond to any of the questions. Like I said, it just helps us keep a better count on who we're engaging in our work and whether or not we're meeting all of Michigan. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Noel. Noel, do you want to come on and talk about the 2019 National Food Hub Survey Report?
Yes,
Thank
happy
you,
to be
Lynn.
here, and
Thanks,
thank
Lynn.
you. Thanks, Lynn. That was it's really interesting to hear about what's happening. It's heavy duty, but it's important information. So my name is Noel Bielaczyc. I'm a value chain specialist and the coordinator of the Michigan Food Hub Network, and I'm part of the MFIN management team, and I'm based at the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2019 National Food Hub Survey Report. As the title of this presentation implies, the 2019 National Survey Report is not quite ready for public consumption. It's still in design. So unfortunately, I don't have any slick charts or fancy infographics to share with you at this point. But what I'm going to do is just kind of provide a quick overview of the survey and some of the updates we made in 2019, and touch on a few sort of high-level trends, and then provide a few specific data points that are a little bit more relevant for institutional markets and food service. So with that, I can get things rolling. So just to provide a little background on the National Food Hub Survey for folks that aren't familiar with it, the National Food Hub Survey is a longitudinal research partnership between MSU Center for Regional Food Systems and the Wallace Center at Winrock International. And the purpose of the survey is to really identify economic growth trends for food hubs across the nation and monitor changes in service offered and variety of customers. It's a quantitative biennial survey, so we conduct it every other year and have done so since 2013. So we have a 2013, 2015, 2017, and now a 2019 survey. And this makes it one of the most comprehensive data sets available on Food Hub operations. And we are hoping to conduct a 2021 survey and are making plans to do that right now. So the survey has changed a little bit over time, but in general, it covers Food Hub operational characteristics, such as kind of years in operation, what business model Food Hubs use, how many employees, that sort of thing. Covers values and mission, finances, and then sort of the big catch-all is challenges, opportunities, and barriers to growth. So, so that's sort of kind of the overview of what the National Food Hub Survey is. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what we changed in 2019. So the 2019 survey is exciting. It's a bit different than previous surveys, more so than there's more changes in this survey than in any previous. we had made changes in 2013, 2015, 2017, but they were all made pretty sparingly just to really ensure that we could make robust comparisons across the longitudinal data. But this year we've taken a little bit more of a sweeping approach to revising the survey, and that was really based on input from survey participants, food hub managers, and other experts in the field. So the most notable change in 2019 is that the survey questionnaire itself was shortened pretty drastically. It used to be around 120 questions, and this in 2019 was only 40 questions. So that reduced the amount of time it takes a hub to complete the survey from 2 to 3 hours or more to less than an hour. And this was really done just because we received a lot of feedback from food hubs that they were just exhausted. The survey fatigue is real. And so we were really trying to be more accommodating and allow some of the smaller hubs with less capacity to participate in this research. Another really important change in 2019 was really informed by and influenced by a 2018 publication called The Racial Equity Implementation Guide for Food Hubs by Tamara Jones, Derek Cooper, Simran Noor, and Allison Parks. We had several conversations with the authors of that publication, and they really helped kind of push the survey in a new direction to help us use more of a racial equity lens in the survey. So following those conversations, we organized a listening session with several food hub leaders and practitioners, many of which were BI POC folks. This listening session really led us to reimagine kind of what the survey can do, and helped generate some new questions on the survey, and also led us to do a separate qualitative companion study that really digs a lot deeper on the topic of food hubs and racial equity. And I'll provide a quick plug for an upcoming webinar on that at the end of my presentation here. So we also included some new questions on institutional markets, which I'll mention a little bit later as well. And finally, I couldn't talk about the 2019 survey without mentioning the impact of COVID-19. It's interesting because the 2019 survey was administered and analyzed and basically written up before the coronavirus pandemic. So it really does reflect a different world than we know now. So COVID-19 did delay the publication of this report a little bit, but overall, we left the report as is, added a little epilogue just to mention COVID-19. So we kind of left the report as is just to leave it as kind of a snapshot of pre-COVID food hub world. And we're, like I said earlier, we're currently making plans to conduct a 2021 National Food Hub Survey, and expect to learn a lot more about how COVID-19 has impacted food hubs and regional food systems, and also really interested in understanding sort of how those regional food systems, how resilient those regional food systems were throughout this crisis. So with that, I can talk a little bit about some of the kind of top line findings. So I'm just going to give you kind of the very high level themes from the executive summary here, and a few little snippets of data that support that. So the food hub sector continues to thrive and mature. The proportion of food hubs 5 years and older has increased each year since 2013. Leading us to believe there's more food hubs that are surviving. And about 2/3 of food hubs are breaking even or better, which is about the same we've seen in each year of the survey. Hubs are successfully seeking loans and short-term credit, and those that are seeking grants are able to seek grants to continue their core functions. Hubs are pursuing social and environmental goals. So this is sort of part of what sets food hubs apart from traditional conventional distributors, is that you know, a lot of them have social environmental goals. Nearly half of food hubs are tracking metrics on their social and environmental impact, and about a third of hubs are actively engaging their community in decision making, and about half are making some sort of regenerative investments in their community. We see food hubs continuing to support farmer and supplier viability. Surveyed hubs collectively purchased or procured products from almost 3,000 individual farms and ranches, and food hubs reported about $32 million in purchases in 2018 from small and mid-sized farms. So about nearly all the food hubs that responded said at least half of their products come from small or mid-sized farms. So food hubs are really a key part of infrastructure to support those small and mid-sized growers to accessing markets. And finally, hubs do see room for growth, but as you'd expect, there's plenty of challenges. About 82% of hubs say demand for their product and services has grown in the past 2 years. And most food hubs expect competition to continue to grow as sort of the marketplace for local products becomes more crowded. So I'm going to just quickly mention a couple of new questions that we included on institutional markets. The first of which is this year, or in 2019, we included early care and education centers as an institutional category and customer type. That was not a category previously included in the Food Hub survey, so we were happy to add that. We also added a question on barriers to expansion in institutional food service. So we asked specifically about what is preventing food hubs from selling more local products into colleges and universities, hospitals, K-12 food service, and ECE and pre-K food service. So those were new questions for this year. And finally, we asked some new questions on tracking social and environmental goals, which we added in partnership with a team from the Cornell University Small Farms program. So that they're going to be creating their own publication on those questions. So here's some of the relevant data points from the 2019 survey that you folks might find of interest. The first one is definitely relevant, and Diane, this is sort of along the lines of what you were mentioning. Even in 2019, we saw that more hubs are selling lightly processed fruit and vegetables. So that trend had already begun a year ago. The proportion of sales of fresh fruit, vegetables, and herbs has steadily decreased since 2015, while the category of lightly processed products has expanded. And in between 2017 and 2019, it expanded like fourfold. So I expect that if we do a 2021 survey, we'll see that lightly processed fruit and vegetable category will grow even more as a result of the demands we're seeing right now from institutions for sort of single serving and pre-cut products. So I mentioned that we included ECE markets in the 2019 survey. And what we found is that ECE really accounts for just a small fraction of gross sales at this point. So there's lots of room to go up in that space. In the last slide, I'll kind of explain some of the limitations or barriers to that market as well. We saw that sales to colleges and universities, as well as K-12 food service, were really up quite a bit in 2019 compared to previous survey, while direct-to-consumer sales and large supermarket sales were down sharply. Again, this is sort of a pre-COVID snapshot, and we would expect that to look much different in 2021. A lot of food hubs have switched to direct-to-consumer sales, food box type programs, so I think we're going to see that jump right back up. Obviously, sales to colleges and universities are are going to be dropping off with classes going online. It's hard to say what we're going to see with K-12 schools, but I think we're going to see a little bit of a funny jumps in the data if we compare 2017, 2019, and 2021 potentially. And I mentioned above, the most hubs expect competition to grow. Really, respondents to the survey felt that that competition is going to come particularly from traditional wholesale distributors that are launching their own local programs. So that's where they're really feeling the pinch. And so I mentioned earlier, new to the 2019 survey, food hubs were asked about barriers to growth in specific markets. So we asked about colleges and universities and hospitals were lumped together, K-12 food service, and then ECE and pre-K food service was lumped together. And we split them out because we thought there might be differences between all those different markets in terms of barriers. And what we found is they're basically the same barriers to all those markets with some very slight variation. And the top challenges in all of those markets, as you can see here, was meeting buyer pricing requirements, seasonality of fresh fruits and vegetables, meeting product volume needs, lack of buyer interest or willingness, and then sort of more structural problems with becoming a preferred vendor and sort of managing the logistics or delivery challenges. I think it's interesting that the second highest challenge is seasonality of fresh fruits and vegetables. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this because of the sort of mismatch between when school's in session and when product is available. And I think that is in part one of the reasons that's driving the shift towards lightly processed products, just because when the product's around and available, there's not much of a market for it. And then when fall hits and everybody's asking for things, that's when food hubs need to have access to a lot of lightly processed and potentially frozen products. So that is it for the sneak peek. And I just want to mention really briefly the upcoming webinar on the companion study. The title of that report is Delivering More Than Food, Understanding and Operationalizing Racial Equity in Food Hubs. And that's based on a series of interviews with food hub managers, academics, and other experts in the field. So we will have a webinar next week to share results from that qualitative study. And it's we'll have folks from a diverse group of folks and food system practitioners who will be presenting on that webinar as to how US-based food hubs understand and operationalize engagement in racial equity work. Registration is required for that. We've seen the registrations get pretty high this week, so I think we're currently trying to figure out whether we need to get a bigger Zoom room at this point. But if you are interested, I encourage you to follow that link. Thank you, Colleen, for putting that in the chat box. It should be really interesting. And that report, as well as the 2019 National Food Hub Survey report, will be out soon. I think the National Food Hub Survey you could expect sometime in September. The Delivering More Than Food report should be available next week at the time of the webinar. So I see a question here.
Yeah, a question
Diane
came in from Diane. I can just read it for you.
Sure, go ahead.
If the Food Hub report gives breakout information for Michigan, is question one.
Mm-hmm. The report does not break out individual states, but we break out Michigan and use that data for the Michigan Food Hub Network. We've never really published a separate report on that, but that's something we might consider. Yeah.
That would be
And
really
then also,
even
oops.
just as a, sorry, that would be really nice, even just as like a short 2-pager or 1-pager or something like that.
Yeah, part of the challenge we've had with some of that is that once you start breaking out states, it becomes easier to tell who's who. So that's part of why we haven't released that data publicly. When it's 200 food hubs all combined, it's really hard to tell whose sales are what. But when you split it out and it's only 10 food hubs, it's a little easier to start to unpack whose sales are what. So that's part of the reason.
And then Diane also asked if you know whether and how Michigan food hubs are engaging to provide minimally processed fruits and vegetables for schools, or if there's any best practices or models to share either from Michigan or nationally around that minimal processing.
I know there's a handful of hubs that really specialize in this work, including the Flint Fresh Food Hub, Kalamazoo Valley Community College, the Valley Hub at Kalamazoo Valley Community College, and Farm to Freezer. I think they're all engaged at some level. I know Flint Fresh in particular is doing quite a bit of this work right now. KVCC had to shut down a bit this spring and summer because they are educational institutions. So I think they're just sort of getting their footing again. I don't think I have any best practices to share at this point, except that, I think where folks see everything going is more light processed product and more individually packaged thing. And unfortunately that's, for folks that are trying to reduce plastic and things like that, it's not where it's sort of that's a challenge in itself. But I think that's where we're going to be seeing things going. But I would be open to and interested in putting together some kind of best practice resource around that. Phil, I see you have a question. Feel free to jump on.
Cool. Yeah, it was just going to be too long to type out. How's it going, Noel?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. So you mentioned that the number of food hubs that have been in operation for 5 years or more is growing, which is awesome. Do you have any other insights on the overall picture of food hubs? Like, is the number that have been in operation 5 years or less, is that fluctuating a lot, or are a lot of them starting up and then shutting down, or is it kind of stabilized? Or
It's interesting if we look over all the years of the survey. There's a lot of stability in sort of the various age categories of food hubs, and part of the reason why we were able to eliminate so many questions in 2019 was that there was almost no change in a half of the questions. So we feel like overall the food hub sector is fairly stable. Where we do see some variation is in the 0 to 5 year category. In that space, there's quite a bit of turnover, I suspect. But what we see is once food hubs get to that kind of 5 to 10 year threshold, they've sort of survived that critical period, and they tend to, once they make it to 5 years, they tend to be able to stick around past that. So, and other observations connected to that is just that the older a food hub is, the more employees it's going to have, the more full-time employees it's going to have, the less seasonal part-time employees we see. So that's kind of what you would expect, but that's definitely a trend as well.
cool, thanks.
For sure.
Garrett, this is Lori Young. Can I ask a question? Just on development, do you find a certain area of the state has a more difficult time keeping the food hub open, keeping the food hubs in that area open? Like the UP, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get ideas, like for egg development, things like that would be important to know.
Yeah, certainly in Michigan, what we see is most food hubs are concentrated sort of along that the line from Muskegon to Detroit along I-96, which is where most people live in Michigan. And, you know, food hubs definitely do better when they're adjacent to large markets and populations. So yeah, the more rural you get, the more challenging it is to profitably run a food hub. Phil, you might be able to talk more about what's happening in the UP. But you know, if you're in a more rural area, you either need to essentially export products to an area with more people, or have some sort of model like that, because the challenge is, you know, if you don't have a large urban area or metro area to sell products in, then you know, there's not much point in aggregating things. So yeah, I would say Northeast and UP are probably the most challenging areas to operate.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Noel? Phil said he likes challenges. We like challenges, I guess, in the UP. And Colleen put the link to that Delivering More Than Food webinar in the chat. So feel free to register for that if it's of interest to you. All right, I think we will move on.
Thanks, everyone. Just feel free to shoot me an email if you have any follow-up questions, and we'll be sure to share the 2019 survey report through the Farm to Institution Network. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Noel. All right, so I am going to kick it off to Lindsey Scalera, who's going to talk about the 2020 Michigan Good Food Charter process. And I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen and Lindsey's going to share hers, if I have that right.
Correct. I'm going to turn a couple things off. Okay, share screen. Right, is the correct one? Yes. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this. You can see my Good Food Charter thing. Okay, good. Okay, I have two screens. So, hi everybody. I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit about the progress and the process for updating the charter, and let you know a little bit about some ways we hope to continue to engage MFIN in the whole process. So on the menu for this, on the menu for this today is providing you that overview, talking about the updates and kind of new directions that we're going in, and then talk a little bit more about what's next beyond the Good Food Summit. And I'll share a little information about the summit as well. And then we're gonna flip to Colleen to dive a little deeper into some of this with a MFIN network discussion, a related discussion. So the Good Food Charter, just in case we have some folks on the line who are probably everybody knows a little bit about it, but I'm going to go over a little bit about its origins. So the charter is intended to be a roadmap for us to create a food system that's rooted in communities and centered around this idea of good food. The original charter was published in 2010. It had a vision, 6 goals, and 25 agenda priorities, which were kind of like, where are we trying to go? What are some goals that will help us get there? And then the agenda priorities were strategies, either broad or specific at different levels, to help us kind of achieve that vision and those goals. And as you probably know, MFIN really helps achieve two of the goals, but goal number 1 being the 20%, or that Michigan institutions will be purchasing 20% of their food from Michigan sources, and goal 2 being that farmers will be able to provide or to supply that as like a kind of a secondary piece to what MFIN does. So good food in the original charter meant affordable, healthy, fair, and green, or sustainable. And it's been 10 years. What? So back in 2018, kind of started in earnest at the Center for Regional Food Systems to talk about what's next. How do we cross that bridge of 2020 And so there were some of you have participated in a bunch of this. So thank you if you have. There were some conversations with network leaders back in 2018 and then again in 2019, and we outlined a plan for how to do this. So we began in fall of 2019 kind of with our expanded, we combined our existing steering committee and the shared measurement committee and invited some new folks in, and we conducted these 4 working draft development sessions. So the idea was that we'll create a working draft, which is sort of helping us identify what's the vision, what's the definition of good food, what are the priority areas, like what are our priorities, and we moved away from having the 6 SMART goals that were in the original charter in favor of a little bit of a different structure around how to go about this. Because in 2010 there was still a lot of good food or lots of food system work happening before the charter was created, and the charter meant to sort of capture some of those ideas, but also set forth a lot of new ideas. We're here in 2020, we're building on lots of momentum and lots of things happening. So we felt that as we update the charter, it really needs to be done in a way that where the work that you're all doing can help guide it and support it, and kind of that it can reflect what's already happening a lot. So we're kind of shifting how we organized it. So then in the winter, we started a statewide feedback campaign. And so you may have seen a survey, or you may have seen me presenting in some things, or someone might have contacted you to get your feedback on the charter. We did some events before the pandemic hit. And simultaneous to that, we were working with our expanded steering committee and shared measurement committee to do some deeper dives into priority areas, identifying, what are all the issues, the opportunities that come along with that, and what are some potential indicators of progress. So we have this whole big piece with shared measurement that goes along with all of this. So this fall, we're going to share what we're calling the charter summary draft. And I want to reiterate that what we're going to be sharing, while it will be hopefully fairly polished, it's not the full charter. So we recognize the need to kind of have that vision, kind of have some common ground, common language around our goal, our definitions of good food, and really a good food system, and these priority areas. But we also know that has to go along with indicators that are really well thought out with this new framework we're using, and that we need to do a lot more work to make sure that the strategies that we're prioritizing and pulling together and highlighting are truly reflective of what's going on now. And so we need more time to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's going to happen. But we'll share that invitation to action along with the charter summary draft at the summit, and we'll be doing other things. So just in case you can't come to the summit, which everybody hopefully can, we'll still, all this information will still be available to you. We'll have a report card that kind of goes over how did we fare kind of on these 6 goals from 2010 through 2020 to the best of our ability. We're going to try to report on that. And we'll also include some milestones around and some highlights around organizations in that, and some information on COVID-19. And we'll be working towards having kind of a 2020 baseline report, or at least a format for that. As we transition into 2021, we'll be doing, there will be 3 committees that we're inviting people to join or continue their service on. The Shared Measurement Committee, a Regional Network Engagement Committee, and a Coordinating Committee. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's the process. So I talked about this, we'll share in the fall, our summary draft, the invitation to action, and the report card. I wanted to point out here that each of the 6 priority areas, which I will show you next, will have a result statement that goes with it. Somewhere along the line, we'll have the draft indicators of progress. We are doing a lot of work to bring feedback in on those as well before we kind of put that draft list out there. And it'll broadly, in the updated chart, broadly describe the issue and opportunity for each of those priority areas. So on to the updates. Our vision for Michigan food systems, this has been updated in the working draft. So Michigan has a thriving food economy distinguished by equity, health, and sustainability. So we're kind of hitting all of our our bases there. It's not that different from the original one. It's just framing it a little differently. We moved away from defining sort of good food to describing what a good food system is. So we want us to focus on the whole system and not just the food on our plates or like the food that's being grown, you know, just one or two aspects of it. So we're looking at this from a systems perspective. And we're kind of looking at like, what are the conditions that would support, you know, economic, mental, and physical well-being in all of our communities. And so I'm going to blaze through this because you can have a copy of this later. But these, we did have some descriptions of good food. And I will say that these descriptions here are echoed almost exactly in the priority areas. So we drew our priority areas from kind of these concepts. So everything is linked. So here's the priority areas. So these are the result statements that I was talking about, so that we kind of have a balance here of kind of meeting people and meeting us, all of us, where we're at, and maybe pushing some things a little forward. So there are some new words here that maybe we haven't, or phrases and concepts that we haven't all necessarily, you know, dug into, but this is an opportunity to kind of find some common ground and invite new folks into this sort of good food movement that we have going on. And so these were developed through those working draft sessions, and we put this out for lots of feedback. We got fabulous feedback from people helping us understand maybe if we were missing something, or what, you know, or if this was echoing for them or resonating for them, for their communities. And we got lots of positive feedback saying, yes, this is pretty much what we want to see. So saying that though, there's a number of questions that go across each priority area, things that are threaded through each of them that we need to address. And you'll notice that in this list, education is not there as its own separate thing. That could change in the future if people, if we feel it's important to create a new priority area. Also, racial equity is not lifted out of this, because those two things especially, as well as like purchasing and policy, we feel like these things can be woven throughout all of the priority areas, and we do need to like think about how to address them in each. And so these are some of our overarching questions that we're trying to address, both in the more full narrative that we're going to be publishing later this fall, as well as these same questions we need to ask that in our community outreach and our that we'll be doing next year. So, and there's probably more questions we haven't asked yet either. But okay, so the invitation to action, I want to touch on this. We will establish a coordinating committee. There's a lot to this, but basically we need to kind of create kind of a structure around how are we all going to work together? How are we going to make decisions about this updated charter? We haven't really had that in the past. We've had a steering committee that at different times has had different membership structures and different decision-making processes. And so we want to kind of kick this off with a process to identify that. So we all know, like, how do we, who am I in relation to the charter, and where do I plug in, and how are decisions made, and, you know, what are the values that guide all of this? So simultaneously, we'll also be establishing a brand new committee that we're calling for now the Regional and Network Engagement Committee. This is where we connect with MFIN. Actually, we would love to have, you know, folks working on institutional purchasing in all of these spaces. So this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this entails in the next slide, but the basic idea is we're going to be identifying strategies, and so that's through regional and network outreach. And so I want to be clear that the charter, these priority areas should be reflective of like what all of our organizations and partnerships are up to, the agendas that you have, you know, whether it's advocacy or programs, but it also it should be a two-way street, so that things that the charter itself supports what you're doing, and that the networks and organizations and regions can help influence like what gets lifted up and prioritized. Hopefully that makes sense. So this group is going to be helping us, you know, figure out how to do that outreach. And also this will be the group that helps organize our summit in 2021. We we're rescheduling our in-person, assuming we're allowed to be in person with each other in 2021 in the fall. This will kind of be the summit planning group as well. And then the shared measurement committee will reform, and they kind of have the charge to help complete the headline indicator selection and guiding that plan to collect and share progress. I'm super excited about the directions for that. Also, we'll kind of put out with this call to action, get involved, and we will have a summit tote bag, so a virtual tote bag for the summit, so we can, if you have things you want to go in there, email me. Okay. I'm getting close on my time here, I think. Regional network engagement, I really want to explain this. This is kind of a new process for us. So the goal is that we want to, reach out to everybody involved in food systems and anyone who could be working or is working on things that help us achieve our vision. And we kind of ultimately want those voices to be present in guiding and determining the strategies that are highlighted or prioritized for collaboration in each of those priority areas, or that move the goals in each of those priority areas. So we will be, there'll be a nomination form for all of those committees that comes out with this. And so if people want to continue on those or join new, we'll kind of have a group of folks who we hopefully will have a good representation across, food councils and our networks and other statewide leaders, maybe legislators, somebody like that, to kind of help figure this out. So the how, what will they be figuring out? We need to ask the question, what's already happening that works? What could be better if there was like an infusion of dollars or support, or if it was replicated somewhere else? And what doesn't yet exist that really could help us achieve our vision? What we hope to get out of all of that is sort of a broad idea of the strategies, which could be policies, programs, partnerships, infrastructures, etc. Throughout this process, not on this slide, we also want to ask people like what their values are, so that we can all kind of come together around a core set of values that are related to all this work. So what I'm hoping that then we'll have this sort of summary. There's a lot more we can do with it. We have plans to sort of figure out a way to share back, who are the leads, who takes the leads on all of these kinds of things. Like, so if maybe I want to start a fresh prescription program, how do I find that out? Well, I know, maybe MIFMA has information, right? Or I could find some examples. So we want that, not so much a clearinghouse, but a way for people to connect through this. We could also end up with kind of a strategic action plan, and maybe a policy or an advocacy platform that comes out of this. And all of this gets connected to shared measurement and the sort of structure that we'll be recommending. So we have kind of a whole year to like work on all this. Okay, just quickly a reminder, we have the summit coming up. We'll have a launch session with a keynote speaker, and that will go through November 18th, excluding election week. Do we have any questions?
All right, so any questions for Lindsey?
I'm happy to go back to other slides. Oops. That's the next one.
I've got just a quick question. It's sort of, when it comes to the virtual tote bag, this is exciting to me. I like this concept.
I don't exactly know how it's going to work, but please ask your question.
Well, I was thinking, the sorts of things we would generally include in a bag might be a quarter sheet or something printed. Do you have a preferred format for that stuff? Are you looking for PDFs?
Yeah, so we could have, it could be a link to something like, or a PDF that people could directly download. I think those are the two main ones. There could be maybe like a video or something. Right now, it's a little confusing. Well, because I don't have the platform nailed down yet, but so at least a link and a PDF would be the two main things. Yeah, so it could be a report, flyer.
And then Phil asked in the chat if there will be specific agenda priority items that come with the new charter.
Yeah, let me clarify that. So the priority areas, these are the priority areas. The original charter had a whole list of 25 agenda priorities that were generated through a lot of like community work and through the, I think the working groups that were established. And so with what we've been doing so far, the reason we're really like emphasizing this is a summary draft is that we've really done chapter 1 of the charter, which is like all the sort of like the foundational, the why, what's the purpose, what are our goals. The next chapter 2 is like the agenda priority. So when I talk about like the strategy outreach, that's the agenda priorities. So we might decide to call them that again for consistency. But for now, I'm kind of referring to them as like what strategies exist. And so that's like policies, programs, infrastructure that could be built or exists, et cetera. So that's what the Regional Engagement Committee will be doing.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Lindsey? Thank you, Lindsey.
You guys know how to find me. I'm going to turn it over to Colleen, and I'll leave these up for now. Or do you have them on your slide?
I have them on another slide.
Not my share then. Thank you all.
And Abby's going to facilitate some questions and discussion in just a bit here, but I wanted to take a moment and use this opportunity to get some feedback from you all. So for those of you who may not have completed our most recent member survey, which is about priorities that MFIN should take going forward, then I would love for you to do that now. So I'm going to put that link in the chat box. This survey has just been out in the month of August, probably not the whole month even, but we're going to be closing the survey at the end of the month. So I'm hoping to just get as much data as we can. So the link is there, and Lindsey, maybe you can play a little more uke for us as our hold music for the next minute or two as people take the survey.
Oh my God, okay.
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's all right. As long as
We'll take about 5 minutes of break if you need to go take care of things, or if you just want to listen, or if you need to take the survey, or if you just want to listen to the lovely tunes.
Yeah.
Lindsey Scalera. Next time I'll bring my viola, Lindsey, and we can do it.
So Lindsey, maybe a 2-minute interlude and then we'll head on back. Thanks everyone.
Colleen, sorry,
Colleen.
I'm getting the same reply that Diane just mentioned. It says the survey is not active.
And have you all not taken the survey before? Or have you? And oh shoot, it's going in that case for everybody. Oh man, okay. I'm going to work on problem solving that issue and get back to you with an updated link. I was having this issue previously before we sent it out, so I'll have to loop back and make sure that we've got it still with the right dates open and active. So maybe Abby, you can take it away. Sorry, Lindsey, to kill the...
Do we still want to give people a break for a minute to go, or do you want to move on?
Well, if I can loop back on the survey, then that can be the break time again.
Okay.
So let me solve that problem and we'll save the break for that moment if that's all right.
Oh man, such a tease.
I know, I'm sorry.
Please do stand up and stretch or take a break and go to the bathroom and stuff if you need to. I know Zoom is like such a blessing and a curse. At least I feel that. So I'm going to share my screen again. So we want to take the majority of the remaining time that we have together to talk about what's next in the course for Michigan Farm Institution Network. So I'm going to start just with a little givens, is that the network formed around the mission of helping institutions meet the 2020 goal of the Michigan Good Food Charter of meeting 20% by 2020 local food sourcing in institutions. So that's kind of what we've been organizing around thus far. The purpose of the network has been and continues to be a space for learning, sharing, and working together to help farm to institution grow. So those are our past and our current present state, and just want to frame us in that for the conversation moving forward as we think about the next steps of the Michigan Farm to Institution Network, that this purpose, even though the mission might shift a little bit in accordance with the Good Food Charter, this is kind of our grounding. Also, just to frame some of the strategies that we've taken thus far in achieving that mission, we've done some tracking around local food purchasing in institutions. MFIN has led a series of product promotions, including the recent aggregation of our MFIN, or our Cultivate Michigan sourcing guide. We've conducted education and training with farmers and food service directors in the pursuit of creating more connections between local foods and institutional markets. We've done research and evaluation along the way. We've engaged in storytelling throughout to help uplift and share the stories and strategies of our network, communications with network, and building communication networks between those engaged in this network and those engaged in state institutions that relate to our work. We've also done a lot of outreach and networking, hosted gatherings for network development and finding new connections, and also fostered leadership development within our network.
Abby, I've got the link. Do you
All
mind
right, we got the
please?
ukulele back then.
Okay.
All right, so Colleen's gonna put that link in the chat again.
And now it's not letting me add anything to the chat. Why is that?
I don't know why.
Abby, can I send this to you via email?
Sure thing.
And see if you can get it in the chat. Here's the link. Give that one a go.
Just another day in our online life of everything.
I know, gotta love it.
As planned. All right. So there you go. Try that one.
Let me know if it poses any issues.
Mine says I've either already completed the survey or my session has expired, but I think
Okay.
I've done it and it worked, and I haven't and will not take the survey.
All right, musical interlude, proceed.
And thank you for taking the survey.
Sorry.
Thanks, Lindsay. Woo! Can you facilitate my morning coffee break? Chime in on my computer at 10 a.m. every day for coffee.
Sure. That sounds good.
At one point early on in the pandemic, I was like, I'm going to create a corner of my house that is my coffee shop house. And I'm just going to play emo hipster music and have fancy art. I didn't do it. I don't know what if it made me that happy, honestly.
I discovered YouTube channels that just stream lo-fi, chill, coffee shop hip hop. It's awesome.
Nice. That sounds great. I'd appreciate you sharing that with me. So thank you for those of you who took this survey here for the first time. And thank you, Lindsay, for our musical interlude. So we move for the next about 25-ish minutes. We want to talk about a few essential questions for the 2020 Good Food Charter as they relate to Michigan Farm to Institution Network. So we're going to ask you to participate. If you want to chat, you can, but we're also encouraging you to open mics and participate in a discussion about some of these big questions. So the first question is about COVID-19 and our resiliency as a food system. So we want to know, as Michigan continues to face the challenges of life during a global pandemic, what lessons are we learning about resilience in the food system and beyond? So what lessons have you been learning about the resilience in the food system throughout the last few months and moving forward?
And I think we could have a farm to institution lens to all of these questions.
Thank you for that reminder.
I'm just chime in because something came to mind from a recent conversation we had with some colleagues working in healthcare. Colleen, Lindsay, you were part of this conversation, but just somebody made the observation that they had experienced some supply chain disruptions and pricing volatility and the same things everybody had experienced throughout the spring, but that actually the products that they sourced locally, in particular proteins, eggs, poultry, things like that, they found there was very little disruption and very little volatility in the price. And so they actually felt that some of the products they were getting regionally and locally were some of the more dependable and stable products in their purchasing. So I just thought that was very interesting.
Jump in on that too. Similarly, this is anecdotally, but I was listening to the Edible Alpha podcast out of Wisconsin, and they were talking about how local food systems are a way to build resiliency and a little bit of slack into the national food system. And the example that was used was how I think they were using pig producers as an example, and how all of the whole system is set up in this, just in time, very tight tolerance. The animal has to be a certain exact weight to fit on the equipment. And when everything shut down and paused, the animals, by the time everything opened back up, had grown too large to fit on the equipment that they were, that they were destined for, and how the smaller slaughterhouses were able to accommodate these wider range of animal sizes. And that was seen as a way to, the system that is so honed in and so precise, when anything disrupts that or knocks it off balance, it kind of all falls apart. Where these local food systems are more adaptable and are a way to actually build a bit of a cushion and resiliency into the overall system, which I thought was a really cool. I hadn't thought about things that way before, and it was just a really neat insight, I thought.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Diane Connors, and I would just echo that when we had a meeting about 10 cents a meal, we had a record number of people join us on the call. A lot of food service directors from around the state, both food service directors who've had the grants and those who would like to receive it. A lot of the board members of School Nutrition Association of Michigan. And among the things that they talked about was the food supply. And we saw that also in our region to do with food pantries as well, that people were just seeing the national supply chains falter, and it gave them a much deeper appreciation for the value of being able to really develop strong relationships with local growers and other local businesses like Michigan Farm to Freezer and other distributors that might, be connected in with those who are providing the minimally processed products. So for me, the thing that's shown our resilience is that appreciation for a local food system. And then there's opportunities that have arisen. We could call them challenges, and maybe that's the next question, but that is that lightly processed product, I think. And so if people can seize that opportunity, I think there's great opportunity for moving forward on these systems.
And we have an addition here in the chat too, from Jamie Molnar, who is our friend who works with school food also from the Michigan Department of Education. And one lesson she has learned is not to rely on one food source due to food distribution disruptions. And I've heard of, from some of those same conversations, there are a lot of challenges with forecasting, and that gets back to Phil's point too. So I think there was a lot of precision into forecasting, but forecasting out a good amount of time for large volume places, and when that's thrown off, then that system has a hard time responding.
Anything else? What other lessons have folks learned about resiliency in food systems as they pertain to farm to institution network and farm to institution activities in your region?
This is Lindsey. And I'm curious what others on the call think about this. I've been hearing a lot about how having existing partnerships help people respond quickly, or like, here's this big huge problem, a really complex set of problems, and I already know who I can turn to at least brainstorm or try something. That has been my experience, and I'm curious what if others are thinking the same thing.
Anyone else experience something similar where they've seen those strong existing partnerships help institutions be able to pivot better?
I think that's part of what Diane Connors was saying around, the connections with local growers, but it could also be network connections in general too.
Not necessarily from an institutional standpoint, and I wish Abby Palmer was still on the call, because I would know much better than I could, but I know in the UP, each region has had regular farmer meetings over Zoom just to connect and share resources and support each other that way. And those networks, I think, got, because of the pandemic, I think some of those networks were loosely there, but because of the pandemic, those got a lot stronger, and those connections got a lot more formalized, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Well, this is sort of off the idea of sourcing, but because Farm to School offers the opportunity for enrichment educational opportunities, we have seen with schools that we're working with in Northwest Michigan, that because, excuse me, because we've had the opportunity to work with different tribes in our region on some educational activities with kids in the classroom and things like that. It's also, we've seen some relationships in addition build between particularly one tribal farm and school systems as well. So for purchasing, for procurement.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so I think I'm going to move us to the second question, which is, how can we ensure that all groups and individuals whose efforts make our food system run are equitably able to participate in decision making? One of the essential questions that Lindsey posited in the 2020 Good Food Charter is around advancing equity and justice. So as we move forward in our farm to institution work, how do we ensure that all groups and individuals are equitably able to participate in decision making? And I think Lori just mentioned something in the chat. I think that might have been in reference to the last question of the partnership between USDA, Department of Education, food banks, and nonprofits, working with Michigan farmers, processors, and distributors to help feed families with the Farmers to Families food box is maybe an example of how that resiliency helped get us through some difficult aspects of the pandemic.
Abby, what decisions do you mean? Decision making at what level?
Colleen, do you want to maybe clarify that?
Well, I'd be interested to hear what Lindsey says too, but I think this gets back to the idea of food access to food sovereignty, and part of food sovereignty is being able to make some of those informed choices yourself, and not having all of the choices made for you. And I think with farm to institution, that might be particularly challenging given some of the institutional structures. But I'm sure within our network too, we could build more opportunities for engaging a more diverse group and having some of those spaces to think and talk about how those decision-making opportunities might be more available within our network, but also within institutional food. So that's how I read that. Lindsey, would you add anything more?
I don't think I would add anything more. It is a twofold question of like the network itself and then the structures that we work within to try to make change. And that second one's a lot harder. Mm-hmm. But I think some of us were on a call or in a training yesterday that was talking about bringing equity into your networks, and it gave me a lot of things to think about. And one of the things that stands out to me is along the lines of what Colleen was just saying about like community members who are most directly affected by the decision making, having the ability, changing structures of power, to be specific, to ensure that those folks are the ones who can make the decisions or influence the policies or practices. So there's like a very local feeling to it, but they were saying, someone on the call yesterday was saying if we work at these like higher levels where it's like representing all of the school districts, or there's our work then is to figure out how to ensure that through the I'm struggling to say it without sounding hierarchical, but it kind of is. That's just like the structure we work within. So like down the line, that like there's pathways for people who are being affected to like have a voice in decision making all the way through. So working with groups that are led by people who are affected by these things. So if we're talking about like, for example, rural communities, can we make partnerships with with Farm Bureau or whoever might be representing folks in those rural communities to make sure that what they're seeing, especially around, food access and issues with food insecurity, that farm to institution can help addressing. So it's like thinking from that lens of like where are our connections and who's influencing programs and policies, and who do we need to go to? Hopefully that helps. It's easier said than done.
For sure. I think another part of that too, doing that work, making those connections, making sure through the charter writing process that voices are heard, especially on a local level, but also after the charter has been revised and put out there, having ways for local efforts and communities to be able to, kind of like latch on their work to the overall thrust of the charter. And being able to not to wax too poetic, but to be able to see themselves in that story, if that makes sense.
My sentiments exactly.
Yeah, and I think telling. So to be able to see yourself in that story means also telling that story and letting people tell their stories. So I was really inspired by what was happening in Kalamazoo, for example, with the Black women farmers group and stuff, and really taking on true power and leadership role. I also had an experience with a person I work with a lot, and I know some of you do as well, with the Intertribal Council of Michigan, who cares deeply about nutritious food in schools and in preschool, also early childcare. And she was just saying that some of the things, she sees a lot. She happens to be working at a level where she sees a lot of the different resources out there and the different networks we're all in, but she's realizing that a lot of people, like at Tribal Head Starts, they have no idea that some of these resources and opportunities are even out there, or ways that they could engage. So I think some of it too is just really and truly, honestly thinking who's not at the table, and at all levels that we work in, to reach out and to, everybody at all levels are busy. So, but how can we make things work so that people really can add their voices in here and be willing and really want to have more people in those leadership positions?
There's an example from your region, Diane, that I was really, really inspired by when I went to the Farm, Food, and Health Conference. And I'm crossing my fingers, this is not official, but I'm hoping that this will be part of the summit. They've applied to present at the summit, but the 13 Moons curriculum. So there's like a curriculum coming out of Indigenous communities that has a farm to institution component to it, but it's like, so there's opportunities like that, just building on what you and Phil were saying of having stories, people being able to see themselves, but then also like all of us can benefit from different ways of looking at things. And so by lifting up those stories, we can be learning like new and different ways to approach farm to institution. And that's a good example.
Yeah, and I can't remember if we provided this feedback to you, Lindsey, when we submitted our feedback for the charter, but I do remember that there was a place where you had, at least initially, you had tribes sort of separated out providing input as tribes, and yet I also think of tribes, they're a huge part of our community, and so I think that people being able to have their own voice as tribes speaking, but then also to recognize that we don't want this different silos. If we're meeting in our own regional communities, getting us all together is something that's really valuable, and utilizing that 13 Moons curriculum is an example of that, where we've been able to work with Michelle on that and with our Food Corps program and things like that. But
yeah, the thing you're referring to, it's a slide I took out of this. It was what the, I'd shared that with the Michigan Local Food Council Network. It's what the regions could look like. I want the Regional Engagement Committee to kind of define that. Because it's really hard to like separate Michigan into regions, even though we have some distinct ones. But to just follow up on that, two things. We we've been working with partners to do outreach with for the charter process with the tribal and indigenous communities, and they in consultation with that requested that originally we were going to have an in-person summit, and providing space within the summit for them to connect with each other was where that initially came from. So we're kind of translating that to a virtual space. And so the intention wasn't to only to segregate, but rather to provide some intentional space as well as integrate. And the feedback that we got for the survey and from our ambassador outreach definitely definitely was helpful in ensuring that we're specifically talking about tribal communities in the priority areas.
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation that is common amongst many areas of how do we uplift voices while acknowledging that they are not distinct, that they're part of the whole, but when voices have been left out for a while, also needing to carve out that specific space. So we want to, I know this is really great conversation, but just acknowledging our time crunch, we have one more question we wanted to get your feedback on of how can institutions use their substantial purchasing power to affect positive changes in the food and agricultural system? So I think we'll just take a couple comments on this question and welcome any feedback over email if you don't, or if you want to type in the chat to get some more perspectives. But what is our role in using purchasing power to affect positive changes in the food and agricultural movement systems? Sorry. Anyone have any thoughts on this question, Phil? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think first I was starting to type it out, but then we moved on. But I did want to echo the siloing comment from the last question. How be careful. We're cognizant of not siloing off equity and justice work into equity and justice work. It's a thread that is wound through the whole thing. But for the values-based purchasing, I think one way could be the metrics that we use, and showing how even small shifts have large impacts could be one way. So that can be a powerful tool in talking with the buyer, saying, yeah, here's how this works. And I think too, some of the data and the stories coming out of the COVID-19 era, where, again, here's what you experienced in this rigid national global supply chain. Here's the resiliency and stability that was found in the local supply chain. And here's why you should buy local as well.
I think for building supply, one of the things that I noticed when I was doing more on the ground farm to school support in our region, I had a big gathering out at our Hort station that was packed on a blizzardy day. It was interesting, of farmers coming to hear school food service directors from Traverse City and all of Leelanau County. I can't remember if we had a couple of other regional food service directors or not. But the key thing that came out of that was that we asked the food service directors to say how much in volume they purchased by either week or month or something of different products that we knew were readily available in our area. And for a number of farmers seeing that data, they no longer needed to have one joint purchase so that they could see that greater volume. It's like when they could then feel comfortable moving forward, trying to adapt their operations and their supplies that they could provide to schools based upon seeing the individual ones and adding that up. So somehow making it visible for the farmers and those who might do light processing and things like that to see what the opportunities can be there, I think could be valuable.
Great, thanks. And I hate to cap off a conversation after not being able to do the question justice, but given we have about 3 minutes left, I do want to get y'all out of here on time. So just want to share a couple quick updates before we close. A reminder about our Cultivate Michigan Summer Featured Foods, which are listed on here in the current Cucumber Crunch, which MSU Extension made a fun video that I'll share with the network later today. So those are our current summer featured foods, and they're all available in the Cultivate Michigan sourcing guide. So that's our compiled sourcing guide for all Michigan, or all Cultivate Michigan featured foods. The Cucumber Crunch is an August-long celebration similar to Apple Crunch and Cherry Slurp, where we're featuring cucumbers. So crunch into a cucumber this month, and I don't know if we have a hashtag for that. My Cucumber Crunch is my guess. I guessed it right. MI Cucumber Crunch. I think Colleen's typing it in the chat. Colleen shared a real update from our member survey, which is that the top respondent is that we need to ensure fair wages for farmers and food systems workers. So that's exciting feedback to get. And just a reminder of the 2020 calendar from here on out. October 20th from 1 to 3 p.m. is the Good Food Summit, the online summit, or it starts the 20th, right? It's a couple days, is that right? No, it's just the 20th.
No. Oh, wait, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. October 12th through November 20th is the Michigan Good Food Virtual Summit webinar series.
It's November 18th, but that's okay, you guys.
November 18th, sometime in that period.
Yeah.
And that our next virtual network meetings are October 20th, where we'll be talking about the Good Food Summit series, and December 18th. So put those on your calendar. And as always, there's more updates on the cultivatemichigan.org website. Any closing words from anyone before? Any other announcements folks want to share? We have 1 minute.
I have an announcement, just a heads up. So I think today you will be seeing some new 10 cents resources coming out from the center, and that includes the 2018-2019 evaluation report, which is a little late in coming, but still timely nonetheless, and a what we're calling a framework. It's kind of like a logic model that we developed with some funding from Michigan Health Endowment Fund and with a bunch of stakeholders who are involved in the program. So that will be coming very soon, hopefully today, from the center.
And we also have a sign-on letter regarding 10 cents a meal. I sent the link out through the Food Speak and other listservs, but if anybody needs that again, it basically, we're trying to, we've got more than 400 organizations and individuals signed up so far on the letter, just to share with key legislators and the governor. We have a new budget coming up that has to be decided in about 5 weeks by the legislature and the governor. I think Haley just put the link into chat. So it would be great if you, even if you've signed it already, if you can make sure that you reach out to others, even if it's just one person, so that we could really increase those numbers and have people represented across the state. It would be great.
Great, and Garrett also shared information in the chat about the Great Lakes Apple Crunch registration live. It's just above the link that Haley shared out. So make sure to share with your community partners. The crunch is still happening in a virtual environment somehow, or in person, I guess, in some spaces, but.
However it needs to happen, it's gonna happen.
However it needs to happen.
And you can register as yourself, a family, household, or social group this year as an addition to the registration page. So anybody that wants to crunch on October 8th or anytime in October, please register. We're getting crushed right now in registration numbers by the rest of the Great Lakes. So yeah.
Bring out your competitive spirit. All right, all. Thanks so much for being with us and spending your morning with us today. We'll look forward to catching you on October 20th or October 12th, excuse me, at the next network meeting. So thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.